Okay.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have an awesome reverse loan officer with some great stories for us, Larry Gable. And Larry, I'd love it if you take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, my name is Larry Gable. I live in Elizabeth, Colorado, work for Waterstone Mortgage, and I've been doing reverse mortgages for about 4 years now. I started out originally in the loan business back in 2001 as a forward loan officer and then stayed there for until 2008. And when that fiasco hit, I got out of the business and went back to what I did best at the time, which was accounting. I got my degree in accounting and did 40 years of accounting in the corporate world as a CFO and a controller.
Wow, I didn't even know that before we started. So you help people with their budgets in a bigger way than most, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it was a real natural for me. It really was getting
Yeah.
and working with numbers and stuff and helping people out.
One of the things we've talked about offline that I think we should probably highlight is at some point I had said, you should talk about the cash flow. And you were like, "Oh, I've already done Excel sheets and shown her that."
That's
So
true.
that background makes perfect sense that you would have such a command of the numbers and showing people a cash flow in what you
Yes.
do.
Uh, yeah, it's like I said, it fits me very well, and I enjoy helping. My goal is to make a difference in people's lives. And retired folks, I am retired myself, although I do this because I think it keeps my brain active and keeps me active. I enjoy interacting with people, but my whole goal is make a difference in people's lives, to be honest with you. And most retirees, their number one concern is, will I outlive my money? I mean, we all have to worry about that at our age. When you're younger, you don't think too much about it, but when you're retired and you don't really have a regular income coming in on a regular basis and you're earning and everything, all of a sudden it's all negative cash flow. And so this was a real natural for me, I think.
So yeah, let's talk about that. What drew you into the reverse mortgage program specifically?
Well, like I said earlier, I was a forward mortgage officer, and I enjoyed that too, especially first-time home buyers. There was nothing better than working with first-time home buyers. One of the first ones I ever did was a no money down. And these kids, this couple, they were both living with their parents, got married, and they bought this house together. And what's interesting was the gentleman they bought it from, his wife had passed away, and he really took a shine to these kids. And so he actually sold them the house at $20,000 under market. So at the closing table, they came in with the $3,000 or $4,000 they needed to close this loan. And I congratulated them. I said, "You do realize you just walked in with $20,000 worth of equity?" And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, if you wanted to turn around and sell the house today, you can sell it for 20,000 more than you paid for it." And they go, "Really?" I go, "Yeah." I said, "You did something that people pay $4,000 or $5,000 to go to a seminar to learn how to do, and you just did it, no money down, and you walked in with equity." And actually ran into the husband about 6 or 7 years later at the grocery store. And he told me they had since sold that house. They were starting their family and bought a little bigger house. And of course, they made some money on their other one. So that got me into the mortgage business. And then when I retired, my wife and I moved out from California to Colorado. And I sat around for about 6 months and I said, this just isn't going to work. I said, I got to do something. And I was talking to one of my good buddies in California who was in the mortgage business. He and his wife were moving to Florida. And I said, "So, Joe, what are you going to do out in Florida?" He goes, "I think I'm going to do reverse mortgages." I said, that is a great idea. I've wanted to do that myself. And so Joe and I went together to work for the same company that we used to work for before. And been there going ever since. I love it.
That's awesome. So you'd said you want to make an impact, and I think you have probably for a lot of clients. I'd love to share with our audience a couple of those stories.
Well, I've got a couple of them. One couple who lives in San Diego. The husband is a Vietnam vet. He's about my age, and he's got a lot of disabilities because of the conflict in Vietnam, bad back, knee, and all this stuff. And his wife was concerned that if something happened to him, she would have to sell the house. And so we did the reverse mortgage. And the greatest thing was after the closing, she called me. She goes, "I can't thank you enough." She said, I feel like a huge load has been taken off of me. And to know that I don't ever have to sell this house if something happens to my husband is, you can't, I can't put a price on it." And I mean, I got goosebumps. I'm like, wow, how cool. And her kids live 3 doors down, so that was another reason she never wants to sell her house, so she can be close to her kids and her grandkids. So that was one of my first loans, to be honest with you. And
Wow.
it really just told me, okay, I can make a difference in people's lives. And so that's my motivation more than anything.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
thank you.
I
And
think, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say another favorite story of mine or client had this other client, and he had had a couple of heart attacks. He was late 50s, had a couple of heart attacks, was off work for a long time. They got behind financially, owed a lot of money. And so anyway, he's 62 or 63 at the time. And the whole time we were talking, his wife kept telling me, I'm not in favor of this. I don't want to do this. He's the one that keeps pushing for it. I said, okay. So even at with the loan application, she told me that. And then at the loan closing, she told me, she goes, I'm really not in favor of this. And I go, I get it. I get it. And so the reason he was doing it was he was afraid if something happened to him. They lived on horse property. She had a couple of horses, and there was no way she'd be able to keep the house. Well, about 6 months later, I got a call, and it's the husband. And he says, hey, Larry, I got this thing in the mail. Can you explain it to me? So I did. And he goes, oh, before we hang up, Pat wants, sorry about that, wants to talk to you. And I said, okay. And so he's going to put her on the phone. I'm thinking, oh, this ought to be good. So he gets her on the phone, and she goes, Larry, she said, yeah, I was never in favor of this. You know that. And I go, yeah, I know. And she goes, I have to say, this is the best thing we've ever done. We've actually been able to put money away. We don't have any more debt. And she says, thank you. And I'm like, wow, how cool was that?
Yeah.
So, that's, like I said, making a difference in people's lives. And I can't get more gratification. Yeah, there's a nice income that goes with it, but honestly, it's the personal gratification of helping other people, especially in their retirement. So that's why I do it.
Yeah. Well, and the income I think is commensurate to the workload. It's a
Oh yeah,
very interesting thing. You have to put a lot of effort, a lot of education, a lot of handholding, right?
correct, correct.
To get that person from I don't want to do this through the closing table, and then she's fighting you the whole time. There's an analogy I've said before is sometimes I feel like I'm dragging the borrower across the finish line and I'm getting beat up the whole time. And at closing, they're sitting there going, "Oh, I'm so relieved." And I'm like with a black eye going, "Yeah,
Yeah,
cool. I'm so glad for you."
that's true. So that's probably the number one reason I do this business. Plus I enjoy keeping busy.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And what an intrinsically valuable thing. So, and I know your practice, you educate in a big, big way, and that is a huge part of what's needed in the market.
It is.
When you look out at your client base, like what's the most educating aspect of the reverse mortgage that you do?
Hmm. Well, a lot of times you're overcoming all the misinformation out there. People come in, oh, the bank owns my house. Well, not exactly. You hear that one all the time. Oh, the bank owns your house, or there's no equity left. It's possible, but that could happen in a down market too. On a forward mortgage, there could be no equity left. So I think just overcoming the misinformation out there is probably the most difficult. And once you get over that, and I think people begin to have faith in what you're telling them and believe what you're telling them, then I think then it's easy.
Yeah. I personally like to highlight the government insurance, right?
Oh yeah, I tell most people that this program isn't even doable without this because a lot of people complain about the mortgage insurance how high it is, and I said, look, it's like any insurance you buy. You don't like to buy car insurance or home insurance, but if you need it, you're sure glad you got it. And
Yeah.
as without the FHA mortgage insurance, this program isn't even viable. If it was, the interest rates would be so high, you wouldn't want to do it anyway.
Right.
So
Well, there are programs that are not FHA insured, but you're right. The jumbos, they do have high interest rates because those lenders
absolutely,
are self-insuring.
that's right. They're taking all the risk.
Yeah. Still
And
non-recourse, which is great.
yeah, it's non-recourse, but also the principal limits are lower too. I mean, they've got to build in a safety net, otherwise they're eating it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
really good point.
yeah,
The amount we can lend is so much smaller than people expect a lot of the time.
correct, correct.
Um,
Uh-huh.
all right. So there was one story I think that I'd love to talk about a little bit more about with the cash flow. You know, people often just look at the reverse mortgage as a way to get cash quickly. And
Mhm.
yes, it can do that. But there was a client you and I were talking about a while back where she was just not seeing the value. And so you, with your accounting background, did all these numbers. And can you talk to our audience a little bit about, how to view the reverse mortgage in the cash flow aspect?
Okay. Yeah, the client came to me and she was paying, I believe it was $700 a month on her forward mortgage. And all she had was an IRA with about $130,000 in it. And the monthly cash she had coming in was barely covering her necessities, water, food, and all that stuff, her basics. So she was going to have to come in with, I don't remember the number, but we'll say $30,000. I can't remember what it was. She would have to come in with $30,000 of her remaining 130,000 to close the deal. And she just said it didn't make sense. And I said, well, let's stop and think about this. If you're putting out $700 a month every month, you're going to go through $30,000 in 18 months or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact number. And at that point, you're going to be hurting. And so anyway, I ended up doing a cash flow showing her if she didn't do the reverse mortgage, I think it was in 4.5, 5 years, whatever it was, she'd be out of money. If she did do the reverse mortgage, yeah, taking that $30,000 out up front was definitely a hit. But in the long run, she's saving that $700 a month, and then she's not going to eat up all that other money. And so I had to do a cash flow showing if she did it and if she didn't. And when I did that, then it made sense to her, and she could grasp the concept. But yeah, it's a tough one sometimes, no doubt about it.
Well, and I think, once you are at retirement, it's very easy to understand. It is about cash flow, right? You're on an income, you have expenses going out. It's a very simple equation to say, oh, cash flow is the most important thing right now. But to people who are not old enough and they're not in retirement, they haven't faced that. A lot of the time, that's not the way they make decisions. Do you ever have that with family members where they're like, well, this is the most financially smart decision, but it actually doesn't serve the client for their wants and needs?
I don't think I've run into that, but can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I have
I
a
see it
small
with,
family. I'm an only child.
that makes it easier.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for our audience, again, some of the myths, let's disband them so that the next people that call you, they already know how these, misconceptions aren't actually true. What are some of the ways, some of the myths that you see that you want to bust here?
Oh my gosh. Well, the biggest one, of course, is that the bank owns the home. That's the biggest one. And then the other one is, well, what happens, if something happens to me, what happens to the equity in the house? They think the bank gets it. I said, no. I said, it goes back to your estate and your kids. They can either buy, get a loan and own the house and rent it or move into it, or they can sell it and take the cash out. Those are probably the two biggest ones I deal with, the legacy. And a lot of times I tell people, especially with a line of credit, if you've got this line of credit, well, one question I like to ask people is, so do you think your kids will spend the money from your house the way you approve, in a way that you would approve of? And of course, it's probably not is the most common answer. And I said, well, look, if you've got $100,000 line of credit, and let's say your kids want to go out and buy a house, but they need it down. You pull it out of your line of credit, give them the 40,000 now while you're alive. Enjoy the benefit of seeing and helping them get started with their life. And I think that's one of the biggest things is to use it as a legacy and use it now rather than waiting until you're gone. And they may just go out and buy a boat or something that isn't practical as opposed to a house. Another way to do it also is to I encourage people if they have enough equity, buy a rental property. Rent increases, you can do those and justify those and keep up with inflation with the income from that. And if you want to pay back the money that you borrowed on the line of credit, you can if you get a good positive cash flow out of it. Or if you don't want to pay it back, you don't have to. I think that's another one that I really enjoy trying
I
to sell.
I can't tell you how much I love that one because now you have two appreciating assets,
Correct.
right? You're not just using the money from the one. And of course, I believe in home ownership because
Mhm.
the opportunity for appreciation there is an amazing investment. You can use the reverse mortgage, which most people think, oh, you're losing your equity, but you can actually double your
Correct.
property holdings. And now that other mortgage is free and clear, or maybe you're doing a small mortgage on it. But in any case, that property has no reverse mortgage on it. So now
Correct.
your heirs are inheriting both. And the whole time you've got cash flow coming in from that property with no mortgage payment, taking that cash flow away.
Correct.
I love it. And so for our audience to know too, you can do that same setup on a 1 to 4 unit property.
Correct.
Have
It's
you had
funny
a
you bring that up. It's funny
yeah,
you bring that up because I've told my kids, of course, they don't listen to you, but I've told my kids when they start out, and I read this from Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you don't own real estate unless it generates income. So I told my kids, instead of going out and buying a home, buy a fourplex, live in one of the units, and you can do an FHA loan and then let these other three people pay your mortgage. And do that a couple of times. And then when you get a good positive cash flow that's covering the fourplexes, then you got enough for a mortgage, then go out and buy a house and use the cash flow from these. So it's funny you mentioned that because I tried to convince my kids to do that. Of course they didn't, but I tried.
well, you know what's interesting? I feel like I can hear our audience saying, "Oh my gosh, I could help my kids do that." When you're a first-time home buyer, I looked into this myself, to buy that, you have to have 20% down for a lot of those multifamily purchases. Well, that's a tall order for a first-time home buyer. But if there's a reverse mortgage where you can pull that 20% down, now suddenly you can actually create that situation with your kids.
Correct.
And maybe you own it together, maybe you don't, that's all up to the person, but uh, that situation is amazing. How, some of us get to a point where we're like, okay, I just want my kids to do better than I did. How can I help set them up in that way? That would be an amazing structure.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Or if you have 3 kids, buy a threeplex, each gets a unit.
Yeah, it can be a little tough, but yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear you. But my wife and I, we did a reverse mortgage on our house. We owned it free and clear, and we were talking about it. And the reason we did it is for the. Well, I've already threatened my kids: don't you dare put me in a home ever. If you do, I will haunt you.
Yes.
And so this is our forever home. I've told my wife many times, the only way I expect to go out of here is in a body bag. I'm not moving. But we did the reverse mortgage with a line of credit so that in 10 years, I may not be able to take care of 5 acres. My wife may not be able to take care of our house. And so we can bring in domestic help to take care of the property, take care of the house, do cooking and cleaning, whatever we might need. And with this line of credit, it started out a little under 200,000. Now it's up to almost 400,000 in just a few years. And I
That
figure,
sounds too good to be true. How does that work?
well, the line of credit grows by the interest rate. And so as it increases every year, I mean, it's just, keeps going up and up. I just love it as a statement every month. And I figure in another 7, 8 years, it'll be around 600,000 or more, depending.
That's
So
beautiful.
sometimes I pull for a higher interest rate because but that's where I sold myself short. I should have got the 10% cap just in case we get back to Jimmy Carter interest rate days. Can you imagine what it would have done then?
My gosh, the whole program would probably be like, "Wait, we didn't predict this. How does this work? How are we gonna make this work?"
Yeah. So anyway, but that's another feature of the reverse mortgage that I think is really beneficial. And then of course, for preservation of your portfolios, I think that's another big pitch that I like to use. So a lot of applications for the product. There really are. And honestly, I think every senior should really seriously consider it, especially if they have equity and they're not using it. What's the number? $10 trillion in equity with people over 62, something like that.
12. It's up to
It's,
12 trillion
yeah,
in senior home equity right now.
yeah. So it's unfortunate that people aren't taking advantage of that, in my opinion. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't get that kind of interest at the bank. I tell people if you got
Mm-mm.
$100,000 in cash sitting in the bank, earning what 1% maybe if you're lucky, 2% if you got a CD. put it on your line of credit.
right? And how about we create a line of credit that doesn't have a payment attached to it? How's that
Correct.
sound?
Correct. Yeah.
People go to the bank to get HELOCs, which I don't know how you feel about them, but the HELOC in retirement years, I think is difficult.
Yes.
It,
Especially after cast and that start paying it back after 7 years.
yeah, yeah, that one's big. So just for our audience to be aware, a reverse mortgage line of credit can be set up and it actually grows the untapped balance. So that's what Larry has experienced himself. Now, the cool thing, Larry, you can confirm this, is that line of credit grows faster than if you waited for your property to appreciate, or if you waited for you and your wife to get older and then did the reverse mortgage.
Correct.
So your strategy is set it up early. And that's my second favorite strategy, because God forbid, if something were to come up, emergency or otherwise, medical needs, some of those costs can be really, really high. And so
Mm.
now you have made the equity in your home available to you should something happen, and you get that equity within a couple of days. You sign the letter,
Correct.
you mail it off, they get you your money, versus scrambling like we see some of our clients do, going, oh, where are we possibly going to get the money? And then they have to start the process. And it takes some, a fast closing, 2
Yeah.
weeks, most closings 30 to 45 days, some closings 6 months, you know.
Another thing we did with that line of credit, we have a large property. We have a 350-foot driveway from the garage to the street. And when we
Wow.
first moved in here, it was gravel and dirt. So one year we decided to put concrete in, pave it. And it wasn't cheap by any stretch. So when we looked at pulling the money out of our IRAs, you pay a penalty. When you take the money out of the IRA, you pay a penalty and you pay taxes on it. And if it puts you up in another tax bracket, you're paying more. So the first year when we did the concrete, we took half of the money out of our IRA, and we took the other half out of our line of credit. And then the next year we took and paid that back. We took the money the next year. We took the second half out of our IRA in the next tax year, paid back the line of credit. So of course our line of credit went back up to full capacity. But we saved taxes by doing that, because each time if we'd have pulled all the money out the first year, it would have bumped up our income to a point where the taxes would have been substantially more. So by taking half of it, we were able to preserve, keep our taxes down. And even with the interest and the cost and everything, we still save money. So that's another good strategy. Is if you have unexpected big dollar expenses, you can instead of taking it all out of your IRA in 1 year, take half out. And it really proved to be beneficial for us.
Yeah. Well, and in case anybody doesn't know, at this point in time, the reverse mortgage proceeds are equity in your home, so it's not taxed like an income or,
Right.
these other sources. So that's a huge strategy. Anybody who wants their CPA to talk to Larry, Larry's the guy. The tax strategy savings for the higher tax brackets. Oh my gosh, some of that stuff, the numbers I've seen are just incredible.
Correct. And I talked to one of the financial planners about that, and he goes, "That's not a bad idea."
Yeah.
That's where the accounting background came in handy.
Yes, I'd imagine it comes in handy a lot for this.
So anyway,
You're the CPA's reverse mortgage professional.
I'd like to think so.
All right, so before we got started, you had me cracking up. So your name is Larry Gable, and you like to go by
Larry the Gable guy. Get it done. I can't say get her done. I got to say gets it done.
gets it done. Larry gets it done, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I was just cracking up at that because my son's favorite movie is Cars. And
Okay.
the tow truck is Larry the Cable Guy. So I hear Larry the Cable Guy in my house probably daily at this point.
How old's your son?
Oh, he's going to be 2 pretty soon.
Oh
Very
my
young.
gosh. Wow. That's a
Yeah.
fun age. Enjoy it.
Oh,
They,
thank you.
they grow up quickly, trust me.
He already has. He's a 99th percentile, so he's gigantic. He looks like a 5-year-old and he's only barely under 2.
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
stay little for a little while, please, kiddo.
Must be fun to carry him around, huh? Not
I'm
anymore.
getting strong.
I'll
Um,
bet.
yeah.
Bet.
I had to get very strong pretty quickly with him.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, Larry. Well, we're near the end of our session today. So I always like to ask the same question, and I get various answers. I'd love to hear yours. If you could change the American retirement, how would you change it?
I think it comes down to our school systems do a poor job of educating people financially, as far as life skills. And I think especially the baby boomers like myself, we didn't get the education, and most of our parents in their work life ended up with a pension. Well, our generation didn't stay with the same company for 30 or 40 years. Most of us moved around every 10, 15 years at the most, and not that many companies offer pensions. So I think that better education would help retirees in the long term, early in life. And I'm glad to see that they have 401ks and IRAs, and hopefully more and more people take advantage of them. I had to incentivize my daughter, who was 30. When she turned 30, I incentivized her to start matching funds with her employer and explain to her how that went. And I told her, she owed me some money. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you take that money and that's your seed money to start, you don't have to pay it back. So she did, and got her started on an IRA or 401k, whatever it was. But I think better education would have been better for people in retirement rather than, it's something when you're younger, you don't really think about it. And, you always put it off. Well, I can start saving when I'm 40. Well, I can start saving when I'm 50. So I think better education overall. And right now, I don't think the schools are, hell, they can't even write anymore. In person.
Oh my gosh. Well, and that brings me to a point I want to make sure we cover too, which is the boomers are facing a retirement that is unprecedented. Your parents, in the majority of them, did not work for 30, 40 years and have to save up enough to live on for 30, 40 years.
Correct.
Even
That's
with
good.
as much education as you could have had, I don't think people foresee or take realistically how costs are going up and how expensive it is to live a very long time. And that, I think it's like if you get to age 60, I think 1 in 4 will get to age 90.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a much longer retirement horizon than any other generation has ever had to face.
Yeah. Good point. Both of my parents died fairly young. My mother died at 61. She didn't even get to collect Social Security, and
I'm
my dad died
sorry.
at 73. So they didn't have to worry about the retirement so long. But you're right, with increased longevity and lifestyle and stuff, people are living longer. But I really think education is the most important thing. Especially kids coming out of school and college. I mean, these kids graduating with college right now with 60, 70,000, $80,000 in student loans. I think that's terrible. Neg am loans, no less.
Yes, we could have a whole session on that, but I will keep this to our reverse mortgage positive
Okay.
session.
Yeah.
My generation has, like 200, 300, $400,000 in debt for school. And for professions that don't pay money enough to get to pay that, like it doesn't make sense. That needs addressed. Maybe in our next lifetime we'll come back and reform that.
Very good.
All right, Larry. Well, I really appreciate your time today. If somebody wants to get in contact with you, how could they?
Well, let's see. I work for Waterstone Mortgage, so you can go to Waterstone Mortgage. I'm Larry Gable. My phone number is, I have to look it up. I have a business line, 303-632-6140. And my personal email is larrythegableguy74@gmail.com. So
Perfect. Thank you so much, Larry. I really
thank
appreciate
you.
being on.
Thank you. This is a pleasure, and I appreciate all you've done for us. Let me tell you.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. You have a
All
wonderful
right.
day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
Okay.